It's the art of the trade war. Just moments ago, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announcing a deal with President Trump that U.S. tariffs will be paused on Canada for at least 30 days. Trudeau says he, quote, had a good call with President Trump and that Canada is implementing a $1.3 billion border plan with nearly 10,000 frontline personnel to work on protecting the border. He will also appoint a fentanyl czar and label cartels as terrorists. And President Trump reacting on Truth, he says this: Canada has agreed to ensure we have a secure northern border and to finally end the deadly scourge of drugs like fentanyl that have been pouring into our country, killing hundreds of thousands of Americans while destroying their families and communities all across our country. That follows the other big win for President Trump. That was that pausing 25% tariffs on Mexico for 1 month as well. This is after Mexico's president agreed to reinforce its southern border with 10,000 National Guard members with the goal of stemming the flow of illegal drugs. Here's President Trump earlier.
Is there any chance that Canada or China could also get out of the tariffs after you struck a deal with Mexico?
Well, nobody's out. I can't tell you what's going to happen.
You mentioned that he could agree to change your mind on the tariffs?
Well, we can always, look, what I'd like to see, Canada become our 51st state. Nobody can compete with us because we're the pot of gold. But if we don't keep winning and keep doing well, we won't be the pot of gold, and then tariffs won't be so good for us. But when you're the pot of gold, the tariffs are very good. They're very powerful.
And Democrats are responding to the president's tariff tango with condemnation and some prop comedy.
It's going to affect beer, okay? Most of it, Corona here, comes from Mexico. It's going to affect your guac, because what is guacamole made of? Avocados, both from Mexico.
We might want to call this the Donald Trump Super Bowl tax. Avocados, tomatoes, beer from Mexico. Price is going to go up.
The average American family is going to have their costs increased by $1,200 for 1 year.
Been looking forward to this epic Jesse Harold takedown of each other on tariffs all day. Jesse, let's start with you. So the governor of Canada, he has decided, let's play ball.
So Trump launches this trade war on Friday. And over the weekend, all I hear from the likes of Harold, inflation, recession, economic Armageddon. What happens? Mexico caves, Canada caves. China is saying, yes, we will absolutely buy as much as we can from your American farmers. And the Dow is essentially flat, so Harold's beautiful portfolio remains unscathed.
As does yours.
China is waging drug and economic warfare against the United States, and they had a pandemic that killed 1 million Americans. They're backdooring automobiles through China. They're dumping cheap steel through Mexico into the United States of America. And the cartels are sending fentanyl and migrants all into our country. Don't get me started on the Canadians, Harold. You know what they do with the dairy duties. We discussed that. Also dumping cheap lumber, which they subsidize. Your friends in the banking industry, they can't even lend in Canada. They can't even accept deposits less than 6 figures. They're also delinquent on NORAD and NATO. And as you heard Donald Trump say, they can solve this problem by becoming a state. We are the pot of gold because every other country needs us more than we need them. And it's not like, oh my gosh, Modelo just went up to $11.99 a six-pack. Well, okay, over there, Bud is $6.99. American consumers have choices. With automobiles, yeah, you might have to pay a little bit more, or you have all these people reshore in the United States. You're already seeing Hyundai, you're already seeing Audi and Porsche make cars here. Steve Madden's removing almost all of his shoe manufacturing out of China. Samsung's leaving Mexico to go into South Carolina. This is a great day for, what does he call it, the most beautiful word in the English language, tariff.
Second most beautiful word, Harold.
So a couple of things. It's good to be back. You haven't lost your fastball, Jesse. I think that the president, I root for him in this. I know that there are many in this country, including the president, who look to the markets and look to the U.S. equity markets as a barometer of how the country is doing, how the country is faring, and we get a scorecard at the end of the day about 4 o'clock. We were down on session lows were far worse than what the market closed at, to answer that point. Number two, the president's in his honeymoon still, and I think that Justin Trudeau, the president woman of Mexico recognizes that. They'll leave it for politicos around both parties to determine if getting 10,000 troops on the border in Mexico, 10,000 in Canada, was worth the back and forth that they had. I'm one that's glad that we got that. For Justin Trudeau also to acknowledge that fentanyl and that they're going to label these cartels as terrorists is a good thing. I hope the president gives a press conference and outlines all of this and lets us know what we have to look forward to. But we shouldn't kid ourselves. The entity we're really focused on is China. And unless China stops sending it, and unless we get a better deal with China on some other things, this won't be worth much. Now, the challenge with Mexico, the tension is the border only, and it's fentanyl, it's human trafficking, it's illegal immigrants. In Canada, the president says it well, we have an imbalance of trade with them on some things. And the question is, even if we're able to get people to build and manufacture in America, do we have the personnel? Do we have the workers in our own country? I think one of the great tensions, and I tried to raise it a week or so ago, we are importing a lot of people in our country, which is smart to do. But we can only import so many without impacting the core of the country. And if we're not going to produce good workers in Michigan and Indiana, North Carolina, South Carolina, Tennessee, people are able to take these jobs to produce and manufacture, we will ultimately have to keep importing people and keep immigrating people allowing people to immigrate into our country. But I root for the president, Jesse. I still believe that if you ask most economists, liberal or Republican, Democrat or conservative, tariffs are taxes on people. So the good thing about Canada, cars, trucks, oil and gas, had those tariffs been imposed this evening, you and I, and most importantly, the people, the working class Americans who put Donald Trump over, they'd be paying more tomorrow and the following day. So hooray for the president for getting a 30-day pause on these increases in taxes.
Judge, I think one of the dynamics that's helping President Trump, yes, he's in a honeymoon period, but it's also the contrast with the last 4 years, which was basically, remember when President Biden yelled at the reporters and said, I know more foreign leaders than any of you will ever, like knowing them, like what good did it do?
Yeah. Well, I think that we are constantly reminded, Dana, the difference between, Biden and Donald Trump. Every day I say, how do we tolerate Joe Biden, given the movement that Donald Trump has made, I think, in 2 weeks? I mean, this is crazy. But Donald Trump is really the first president to use his economic might to influence foreign policy and to better the situation for the American people. And the bigger issue, instead of worrying about tariffs, I think, is how can we protect jobs and manufacturing? And I agree with you on that. But, watching the Democrats now take out an avocado and guac and all that, all of a sudden they're concerned about grocery prices. I mean, where were they the last 4 years when Americans couldn't afford groceries and they couldn't talk about it, which is one of the reasons they lost the election. They're so politically and ideologically motivated that they will never sync with the American people again unless they get right with the American people. But think about the fact, Dana, that if you go to Europe, you don't see American cars. In the United States, in New York, it's Mercedes, BMW, Jaguar, Volkswagen. Why? Because they, as far as they're concerned, they place tariffs on American cars, and then we just buy their cars. It's time for us to really level the playing field because we're tariffed all over the world. But the president is doing it in a way where it's about fentanyl, it's about the border, it's about Canada caving and Mexico caving. And look at Colombia. The first week, you're not sending us our criminals back, and then all of a sudden we're sending the criminals back. Venezuela, I mean, you've got Rick Grinnell got prisoners back from Venezuela, and now they're taking all Nicaragua back. It's like Donald Trump said, you're going to take them back and you're going to like it. So this so-called dumbest trade war by the Wall Street Journal is not a trade war. It's really a drug war.
Greg, I don't think that the Democrats complaining about egg prices is going to work. They didn't care about egg prices for 4 years.
Well, they don't have a lot to go on at this point. I always enjoy a good prop comedian. With Chuck Schumer trying to prove his point with avocados and Corona, that was the first time I saw it. But he should commit to the bit. If he's going to say this is what you're going to miss from Mexico, he should have then had explosive diarrhea just to show you everything you're going to miss. Every Monday, you get the question from Hair and Makeup, how was your weekend? You know, did you watch the game? Did you go apple picking, Harold? Did you finally throw out that old futon, Jesse? Imagine asking Trump that question. So how was your weekend? Well, I got Venezuela to release the hostages.
Yeah.
Panama agreed to get China out of its business. Mexico agreed to the border issues. Canada folded. Colombia caved. I got rid of USAID, kicked out 51 Intel liars, fired DOJ deep staters, and I got Canada to punch itself in the face. So how was your weekend? So this is a requiem. Is that the right word?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. You don't even know what I'm going to say.
Don't listen to me.
It's a requiem for people who work on the weekends. You know, the guy that comes in when no one else is there, he's got a big mug of coffee, decides to check his email. Government doesn't work on the weekends. Elon Musk trumped it. The statement, the early bird gets the worm. It's the early bird that works weekend gets more worms than a bait shop. Mm-hmm. So everything is happening so fast, which I love. I read somewhere that stenographers can't keep up with Trump.
Yeah.
You know, when Biden was in office, the stenographer would actually run personal errands between his thoughts. So everything is faster. Everything is faster. Trump 2.0 versus the previous administration is like a smartphone versus a Commodore 64. And it's understandable and it's cohesive because every single action succeeds from a fidelity to principle. America first, people get that. And the one in charge is known not to bluff. So you put those two things together and the world is your oyster. But unfortunately, Democrats, they've got a seafood allergy. They couldn't get anything done. So now you learn the lesson to fight big government and the deep state is to be fast and agile, because that's the only way you outrun a blob. The question is, was this always possible? You know, were the previous administrations keeping the golden age from us? And did Trump just release the dam literally in California, figuratively all over the world? Because I've never seen so many people say, no, you can't do that, and then say, yes, right away, sir. I was wrong when I said that he would complete his presidency in 3 months. It's now 2 months, and it'll be under budget.
All right.
In your face, Harold.
No bluffs given.
Yeah.
Still one of my
no
favorite
bluffs
lines
given.
of yours from last week. Kept me laughing all weekend.